then that got stuck in the mud as well, and then somebody else went back and they got another tractor, and I think that eventually pulled both of the other tractors out. I mean, tractors, gigantic, colossal machines. So I don't know whether I told that very amusingly, but it was very amusing when they recounted it to us. It just seemed to be typical of the way rural Buryats and Russians sort of went about things in a very sort of like disorganized way. One bloke's lorry, he'd gone into the shop or something like this and left the handbrake off, something like this, and it just rolled on out of the village. I don't ever know what happened to it. But yeah, just all a bit sort of like chaotic, and you hear stories like this and you think, yeah, I can believe that, wouldn't happen in Britain, but over here it that's the way of things. Another story came back to us about, in fact, after we'd left them, one of the last nights there, they'd had a sort of dinner celebration with the locals, and the project manager, a guy called Gilmore, who's a civil engineer like myself, and thank God gave me a little bit of respect over it as well, asking my opinion about things. But he's a very middle class, very Tory, but he was a good laugh. He was a good person, and he couldn't hold his drink at all. When we visited the camp, there were stories of like this party that they'd had where like two of the girls had had to like put him to bed, and he was just like all over the place. Really quite a big bloke, and two girls that had like put him to bed were like tiny, so they'd had to like just like drag him virtually. But on this last night or something, they had this meal with the locals in this building in the village, and they were sat outside afterwards on the veranda, sort of balcony or whatever, and having vodka, having more vodka, having beer, having vodka, and at one point he sort of rested back in his seat, tipped back on two legs, and then just fell off the edge of the balcony. There are various reports. It ranged from 10 feet to 3 feet, but apparently he was so drunk, his body was so relaxed, it just absorbed the impact, and he didn't really know a lot about it. The puzzling thing was that he had a scratch on his head, but on his forehead, so that was all a bit of a mystery. But another great story from that camp. While we were there, it started to rain, and this, to quote Vincent Woodward, it rained like I've never seen rain before. In fact, it was so heavy. I was sat in this WAS van, waiting for the others to come back from the camp. I'd stayed in the village because it looked like the rain was getting pretty heavy. It was so bad that we couldn't actually see out of the vehicle. There was so much rain running off the sides of the vehicle that it just formed a sheet of water coming down the windscreen and the windows, and we could see nothing, absolutely nothing at all. It was I was listening to it was either a radio or a cassette the driver was playing, and I actually understood some Russian song lyrics, which translated as basically "I like Coca-Cola." We'd heard rumours that on the way to this camp you could see fields of hemp and cannabis, pot, grass, whatever you like. And on the way out, we didn't actually see any. I think we were probably on the wrong side of the road, but we'd certainly heard from the people at this camp that they'd got hold of some and they'd dried it out and smoked it. I think it was all a big secret, but people told me because they knew I might be interested. But anyway, on the way back, we were looking out for this, and there were huge fields of sunflowers, just stretching off into the distance. And just before we got to these fields of sunflowers, the WTN guy, who was the cameraman, who in fact was Russian. Basically, they employ sort of native people in native people, but people native to the country that they're setting up a franchise in, I guess, or whatever, however they do business. But anyway, the cameraman told the driver to stop the car, and he got out and he was running around all these sort of these bushes and stuff like that, and I couldn't make out from the car whether they were dope plants or not. But suddenly he gets out his Swiss Army knife, grabs this plant by the stalk right at the very base, rips it up, got that one, goes over, gets another one, got that, then he runs off and he gets another one back and puts it in this blue barrel in the back of the van. Then 5 minutes down the road, we stop and there's these huge fields of sunflowers, as I say, and just down the embankment, between the end of the embankment and the sunflower, are about 2 meters, a sort of wall of cannabis, and these plants are 6-7 feet high, but absolutely gigantic. So I take loads of pictures, and I even took back the top of one of the plants for my own purposes, and just made sure that nobody was going to squeal on me. WTN are immune from this, but drugs are verboten within Raleigh. Oh, alcohol's okay, of course. You're a pisshead, that's fine. But anyway. And then 5 minutes later we were stopped at a police checkpoint. It's oh, please don't look in the blue barrel. Please don't look inside my camera case. And they didn't, and they let us go past. I was quite relaxed, actually, because I knew that, it wasn't going to happen. We'd never been searched. None of the vehicles had been stopped in had ever been searched. They're more concerned about whether you've got the right papers or not. It's all about people, not things, So over the next couple of days, I dried out these plants between sheets of newspaper at the bottom of my suitcase, and eventually they dried out, and I took some with me on the train going back with the venturers. And I'd smoke some, and nothing really sort of didn't really do anything for me, in fact. But on the train, me and the doctor who'd come with us, Catherine, we were eating some, and it was really weird because you'd eat some, and then like half an hour later you'd get this, hey, something weird's happening here, and then you'd be back to normal. And so I don't know whether it was a placebo effect or whatever. So, well, the next couple of days were a case of getting ready for the arrival of everybody coming back from the projects, and sort of doing some of the administration to my films. I mean, it's all a bit of a blur now, writing out reports on the projects that I visited, taking the staff shots that I'd yet to take, photographing people packing up the containers, which of course were sponsored like virtually everything but our underpants. For once we had everybody back at field base. There were supposed to be a few sort of expedition events. The first one was the expedition party, which over the course of the last couple of weeks, groups have been putting together ideas for sketches, a sort of review type thing. It ain't half hot, mum, sort of stuff. Generally, with all related to the expedition, and even up to the sort of the evening. That evening, nobody was sure whether it was going to happen at all, and it did. It went ahead in the bar at Field Base, the Stalovia, and yes, it was a brilliant evening's entertainment. People had written songs. There was a sort of an award show where people were given a sort of awards for the best and worst fashion sense. This went on for ages. They had a whole list of awards. I mean, I think this bit went on for like 1.5 hours. It was a great evening, and I was a bit sort of, I don't know, what do you call it? There was a great anticipation. I was a bit sort of reticent about it because certain of the venturers had taken a real, I don't know, disliking, but they found my sort of individualism a little bit freaky and a bit threatening, I think, and because they're quite young, early 20s, whatever. They didn't like that at all. So I thought that there was going to be something really, really hellish. But in the end, there wasn't. It was actually very flattering. Yes, one of the sketches was in fact a piss take of Blind Date, and the various, there are the three lucky hopefuls, I don't know, the three sort of contestants, And of course they were three members of staff, supposed to be three members of staff, and it was like, one was supposed to be the communications officer, Geordie, and all this girl had done was put on a staff t-shirt and turn her baseball cap back to front, and she looked, paint a moustache on, and she looked exactly like him. It was brilliant. And then of course one of the contestants was me. And there was a little reference in there to the fact that I wax my chin, and everybody found this quite hilarious, and I did as well. I thought there was going to be something more hurtful, but it was no more than a reference, really. And then in two of the songs, I was mentioned in one of the songs. Just the fact that I was there was mentioned, and apparently I'd left this group with a phrase. We'd been having a sort of political argument. Somebody had said, "Oh, get real, Andy," and I said, "Yeah, get fucking real." And apparently this this stayed with that project group for the next 3 or 4 weeks, and this turned up in the song, "Get Fucking Real." Yeah, so two mentions, and a quote wasn't bad, I thought. And then we came to this awards ceremony, etc. And I hadn't been mentioned at all, and not that I was expecting to be. I thought, well, I've had my little bit of sort of glory there. But then it came down to the very last one. The award for a lifetime's achievement in Wendyism. Now, being a Wendy is being a wimp, or just making mistakes or whatever. But I could have taken that really badly, but it didn't feel like that. It didn't feel like that at all. And the fact that basically I had the star prize out of all the staff, they'd chosen to give me the star prize. It was brilliant. It was absolutely fantastic, up in front of all those people, and clapping and cheering, and it was amazing. It was absolutely amazing. Of course, they still wanted to plaster me with food and stuff like this, which became a sort of real pain in the ass over the last couple of days. Drinking sessions generally ended up in food fights, and people being picked on and tied to trees and having pilchard smeared in their hair and butter all over their face, and all this sort of stuff. And they generally wake people up in the middle of the night, drag them out of their beds and do it, and it's like, well, there's no way, because I knew that some of those people wanted to hurt me, basically. So I locked myself in my room, and then the key, I was sharing it with the Dr. Catherine, and the key disappeared. She accidentally left it in the door one day for like 5 minutes, and somebody nicked it. So we got the spare, and then in the night I heard them trying to get in, but I put the key in from the other side and twisted it, and I don't know, I think I tied it up with string or something like this so that nothing could be done to it. I just heard all this swearing outside, and then eventually I slowly removed the key and looked through the keyhole and just saw this pair of eyes on the other side, or rather just this bloke sat on the other side of the corridor just staring at the door, sort of hate in his eyes. But they never got me. they got virtually all members of staff, apart from myself, which I feel quite proud of, evading that humiliation. Because, yeah, on the very last day in Irkutsk, we had a boat trip. Some of the people hadn't actually ever been to the shores of Lake Baikal because they'd gone off on one mountain trip or one sort of walking project after another. So this was arranged for them, and it was a chance just to have the whole expedition together for a day. And through some contacts, one of the project managers had managed to get the ship Baikal, which is the biggest ship on Lake Baikal, and you had 80 people, 90 people from the expedition on there, like 3 or 4 bus loads, and it wasn't full, it wasn't crowded, big ship anyway. And so yeah, we sailed from point on the eastern coast, the point where the river Angara leaves Baikal and flows down through Irkutsk. That point is called Listvyanka, and we sailed out from there, sailed off to part of the coastline, which is there's another national park on the other side of the river, sailed around to that, had lunch on board, and then came back. Thoroughly pleasant day, and that's when I took the expedition photograph. I mean, I was so glad that I'd done my brother's wedding in 1992, because although it wasn't difficult, it was a bit nerve-wracking getting 80, 90 people together down there, all to look in the right direction and try and bracket the photograph and take different angles and stuff like that, landscape, portrait, blah blah blah. And I did it because apparently last year, or rather 1993, Russian expedition was a complete disaster. The expedition photograph didn't happen, so I was glad to have got one over on the previous guy. So that was it. It was over, and we were the next day. Me and 4 staff, Catherine, Dr. Annabelle, the PR, and Dave Laming, the project manager and policeman, got on the train with all the venturers, or the British venturers, rather British and Hong Kong, Malaysian, Italian, Irish venturers, and we set off for another 4-day journey back to Moscow. Very quiet on the train. Nothing like going down to Irkutsk. People went to the bar, but they didn't go over the top. Most people didn't have very much money anyway. It centered around food, getting some decent food off the stations, stuff like that. We sent Catherine, whose Russian was better than anybody else's, out to get some food, and she brought back loads of pasties and boiled eggs and vegetables and and stuff like that. And we had Be Well, our dried rations, and Compo as well. We did very well, but unfortunately I caught a cold halfway through, and my bowels started like playing up, basically. Yeah, we got to Moscow in the early morning and ended up just wandering around, this like group of 60 people just wandering around. We were trying to find a cafe or or McDonald's or anything just to sit down. McDonald's wasn't open until 9 or something. But yeah, it was just a day of sort of killing time, really, because although I was staying, 3 of us were staying in Moscow for another 2 days till the rest of the staff caught up, and I think that was a weird thing to think about, that we'd left Irkutsk 2 days before the rest of the staff, and then it took us 4 days to get there. But when we were halfway through the journey, after 2 days, they'd get on the train. So we'd actually be on the same journey together, but several thousand miles apart. And of course then we got to Moscow and they took 2 days to catch us up. But yeah, some of the people went off to see the Kremlin. I didn't, because I was just feeling so dodgy. And for once we'd got them to the airport and seen them off, seen the venturers off. We had to sort out a place to stay. 2 of the international venturers from Hong Kong were also staying in Moscow and then going on to St. Petersburg. So we found 2 flats. They were right next door to each other, sort of homestay things where you go and some middle-aged lady sort of makes you at home and sort of cooks you meals and stuff like that. And had a brilliant meal at this lady's flat, and then we went next door to ours and stayed there. The next day, Dave and Annabelle was off with her mates from WTN. She didn't care about us. Dave and the 2 international venturers went to this place outside Moscow. There's something around Moscow called the Golden Circle, and it's basically this ring of villages, towns, whatever, about 60 kilometers out, that have got incredibly impressive churches. And there's one place in particular where you've got to go. So they went off to see that, but I just stayed around the flat, and watched telly, read a book by Douglas Adams, The Long Dark Tea Time of the Soul, which is moderately amusing, not as amusing as Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I've never read, but I have seen the TV series and I was quite amused by it. Watched Russian telly, which for some reason had a sort of an afternoon break in it, like British TV used to do in the 60s. Don't know if you remember that. And but basically I couldn't really leave the toilet. I did go out and go to the market nearby. We were very near the university and the headquarters of the Moscow State Circus, Lenin Hills. Um, and there was a tube station nearby and a sort of market, and I went and had a wander around there for about 2 hours, but that was the most I could manage. I just had to get back to the flat, otherwise disaster would have struck at the end of that. But it's walking around, seeing the westernization of things and what Western goods were available. Bought a few presents, some spirits. Or didn't know, I bought that at the airport. But I bought Claire a copy of, I think it's Russian Vogue, or Russian Marie Claire, or Russian Elle, or something like this. I think it was Russian Vogue, no, Cosmopolitan, that was it, the Russian version of Cosmopolitan, featuring this stunning woman on the front, big yellow cover, yellow background. She's wearing this amazing sort of strapless dress, the gigantic breasts. Well, not gigantic, but there we go. But yeah, Dave and the two venturers had a good time at the churches. Apparently the train they went on was like hellish, just full of drunken, poor drunken people, I guess. Just like, falling about all over the place and being sick and stuff. But I felt a bit naughty, like, because I argued for a place on the train with the venturers. On the sort of the strength of the fact that I was the photographer and I could have 2 days in Moscow getting some really good photographs for the photo library. And of course, because I was ill, I didn't go anywhere. And I was taking a sickie, but also it was my only day off. It was my only day to myself for 3 months. And those times when you could just be alone were incredibly precious. Like the journeys I made where I wasn't accompanied by anybody, they were in actual fact, I thought they would have been really crap, but they were good. I proved to myself that I had an inner strength and that I could do these things, but also it was the fact that I didn't have to be bothered about anybody else. It was just me. I just had to get me from there to there. But anyway, this day was, as I said, time to myself and my only day off for 3 months, and so I felt I deserved it. So then the next day was my very last day in Russia, last day in Moscow. And we got up early and went to meet the rest of the staff at McDonald's, and took a ride on the metro, the Moscow tube system, and still amazingly cheap. The inside of the tube stations are absolutely beautiful. I don't know if you've ever been to Burnt Oak. One of the stations up around that way, North London, but they're very old, and as you go up these sort of escalators where the sides, instead of being sort of burnished chrome or sort of burnished brass, and then in the middle, between the escalators, are these stands with uplighters, on the top, lights facing upwards, bouncing the light off the ceiling. Incredibly evocative. And anyway, that sort of style, very Art Deco. Lots of mosaics and murals depicting, heroes of the revolution and stuff like this, I would guess. And and the trains are clean and efficient, always on time, absolutely to the second. And in fact, there's a thing that counts down the seconds, not the minutes, but the seconds to a train arriving. Yeah, met the rest of the staff at McDonald's and caught up on all the stories about who was shagging who on the train and who was smoking dope and all this sort of thing. For the first time for over a decade, I would say, I had a McDonald's, because of course I generally boycott them. But I wasn't paying for this, Raleigh was paying for this. And so I guess that ended my boycott, really. Well, not ended it, but a temporary hiatus in my boycott, because of course they cut down loads of forests in South America for their, slash and burn for their meat farms, or that's where they get their meat from, farms that are opened up through slash and burn agriculture, so which shouldn't be encouraged, so therefore I boycott them. Then we went off for a trip to the Kremlin, which is gigantic. I mean, it's huge. It's about the size of the City of London. Not the Tower of London, the City of London. With a wall as high as the Tower of London all the way around it. And there's only about 2 or 3 entrances. And you get inside, and I thought it was going to be just like one large palace or whatever, but of course, because of the size of the thing, it's got a little park there. All the churches are together. Cathedrals, I should say. Ivan the Terrible's cathedral that he had built, Ivan the Terrible. Peter the Great, blah blah blah, Catherine's, whatever. And a couple of modern buildings, like ultra modern, like I don't know, 60s, 70s. Then a couple of sort of 18th century barracks and things like this. And this is the Kremlin. We were only there for about an hour, really, and you don't have a chance to see that much of it. You'd need a day or 2, 3 maybe, and a bit of money to go in and out of the churches, because although it only costs 500 rubles to go in, you got to pay to go in each of the churches. Yeah, so I wasn't I wasn't ill at all by now, and this was a really good trip. Then we went back up to Lenin Hills, where you get it's where the river that runs through Moscow, I think it's the River Moscow, there's a bend in it, and there's this huge, basically a cliff above that, and that's where the university is, and where this big sightseeing place is, where you can see out across the whole city. And of course you get loads of stalls selling old Russian uniforms, those dolls with dolls inside them, with a doll inside that, etc., etc. I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, I bought my brother I think it was a Russian army commander's hat, don't know, 10 quid or something like that. And people on the bus were kidding me that it was probably a bus conductor's hat. But yeah, and then we left. Then we had to go off to the airport and get the plane back to Britain. Lose 2 hours, and Claire picked me up, and we all said our goodbyes and stuff like that. And then Claire's brother's girlfriend had come with her in their sporty car, and she drove us back to Brixton. And then we got back about 5 to 10, and we ordered a takeaway pizza. And 10 o'clock, bang on time, on channel, on Sky, cable TV, it was time for Star Trek, The Next Generation. And it was like I'd never been away. I was eating a pizza, takeaway pizza, watching Star Trek, and it was like, bing, it's over, back to reality. Well, I want to thank you, Vince, for bearing with me through this odyssey, and I hope it's interesting, and I hope you've got this far. Of course, it's now July the 23rd, and it's over a year since I left for the expedition. Not quite a year since I got back. But I feel very weird about that. That it's still dominating my life. And of course, I've done loads in between, which I haven't told you about on this tape, and I haven't asked you questions about you and Stacey. So I'll try and make up for that now. Well, I guess you're dad again. Dad for the second time, and Stacey, your mum for the second time. And I hope everything's gone okay, and you've got a nice bouncing boy or girl. And I haven't phoned you up because I want you to get this tape first, but that's by the by. I just wanted to say how pleased I am that you decided to have a second child, because I know you weren't keen on it, Vince, and I just felt that I don't know. I don't like the idea of only children. It seems like a bit of a very sort of strange existence. And from what I've seen of only children, they do actually have sort of problems in relationships. Okay, maybe, I've only met like 3, 4, 5, I don't know, but they seem to have problems with relationships later on in their life, because they're used to being like, the one, everything's focused on them. I don't know. I don't think Sophie would grow up maladjusted with two great parents such as yourselves. But it's but I think to have a brother or sister is a brilliant thing. Not really even so much when you're actually growing up. even when you're older, some of the best times that I've had with my brother has been since we've been adults. Went on a couple of holidays together, and we spent two weeks in sort of some trying circumstances in hitching around Europe, and we only had one sort of argument really, and that didn't last very long. To spend so long in somebody else's company and just be sort of very at ease is a good thing. I mean, this presumes that you end up sort of loving each other, but unless something horrendous happens, then you generally do, I think. When my brother got married, that was good. I'm sure both of you know this, although Stacey, your sister, was a good deal older than you. I don't know if you had that bond growing up, but definitely you and your brother Ian, Vince, seem to have a bond there, and I think that's a great thing for children to have. And it also, instead of being the two parents and the child, it is more of a family, although obviously two parents and a child is a family by definition. I see family as something being a bit more extended. But then, you see, I also frown upon, if I can do such a thing, people who have more than two children, because that just expands the population, which is something this planet does not need. But I think people have a right to replace themselves, and if everybody just had two children, presuming the family stayed stable, then we wouldn't have any population growth, and things would probably get better rather than the way they're heading. So, as far as I'm concerned with the question of children, I try and look beyond the immediate effects, but I also try and look inside the relationships that it affects. And anyway, as I said, I feel I'm very pleased for you, and I'm sure until they reach puberty, your children will give you many hours of joy and satisfaction. Until they reach puberty, of course. Well, I think that's the most important thing I wanted to say, really, because if I started on any other subject, such as sort of what I'm doing, I could just carry on for ages, and I don't really want to do that. I failed to get into art college yet again this year. I've had 3 interviews. No, sorry, I had 2 interviews and made 3 applications, and one I didn't even get an interview for. So I'm sort of not backtracking, but I'm regrouping on that, most definitely. In September, Claire might get a job. It looks good so far, and if she does, then we're looking at doing some serious saving, maybe moving house, getting a bigger house, one that we might be able to have babies in, and cats, a little garden, and basically not be tied to the other leaseholders here, so that if I want to repair the roof, I repair the roof. Yep, we're not going on holiday because money is really tight. I worked out that Russia cost me about 4,000 quid, which, was well worth it, but it's fucked my finances up right from, this whole year, basically. But we're just getting through that, and we're just getting on an even keel. So I'm having a bit of trouble at work. They won't upgrade me. They won't put me up to the next grade. And basically the reason is that I'm not doing the things that I should be doing. But the reason I'm not doing them is because I haven't been given those suitable jobs, the jobs that prove that I can do this job. And that's been happening for 3.5 years now, and I'm thoroughly pissed off about it. And basically I'm kicking up a fuss now. I think it was Clint Eastwood who said, "Never leave a man with nothing to lose." And at the moment, apart from my job, of course, I've got nothing to lose. In terms of work, that is. So at the moment I'm unlucky but determined, I think, and I'm reaching the end of this side, so I'll see you on the 6th side of this epic.